I have released this networking review quite early. Please be aware some of the information contained herein may change as the developers are still working on the game. Should that happen, updates will be provided in the annotations and video description. Now then, is the networking component of Call of Duty Ghosts flawed? First, it is important to note that no form of networking is perfect. It is always an exercise of balancing costs and benefits, given that any method used has side effects. Everything a programmer does here is based on weighing these pros and cons and choosing the best option according to the developer's vision. With industry standard networking, that which is common to the older CODs and most other FPS games, we can see a very familiar situation. Games are excellent at the lowest of pings, but the quality of gameplay generally deteriorates as pings increase. Solving this problem is often easy, accomplished by leaving to find a new match, or for the developers improving matchmaking, but it is a permanent reality for those who have terrible connections. With the past two releases, Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2, it appeared the developers were attempting to overcome this problem, ensuring all gameplay would be fair regardless of ping. Assuming proper implementation, only reaction time and skill would determine the outcome of a match. However, even with proper implementation, that benefit comes at high cost. All in-game delays must be significantly increased, leading to very unresponsive gameplay. This can be experienced as requiring more bullets than should be necessary to kill a player, for one example, or more accurately, a long wait time before opponents die. The side advantage, how far ahead a player is by their viewpoint compared to where they are seen by others, then becomes extremely pronounced, leading to players dying to opponents they cannot see. But perhaps worst of all, there is no escape from this reality. You cannot simply leave a bad lobby, as all games will lag. In essence, it is the complete opposite of today's standard networking. You may agree or disagree with the direction our developers took, but I leave that to you as it is a matter of opinion. It is not merely opinion, however, when the developers fail to implement their chosen method correctly. It is simply broken, as were both of those games. That brings us to Ghosts, where it appears the developers have abandoned that path in favor of a standard implementation. The game behaves just like any regular FPS, meaning many of the problems I have discussed concerning Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2 no longer apply here. As dedicated servers are expected to be implemented on all platforms, I must clear up some related misconceptions. A dedicated server is simply a host which does not actively play. For games without server browsers, such as Ghosts, at least on the consoles, a dedicated server does two things. It eliminates host advantage, as the host does not play, and it prevents host rage quitting, again for the same reason. You may or may not have a good connection to these servers. In fact, you would have the same connection to a dedicated server as a regular host with the same internet connection. Viewing dedicated servers as the holy grail of lag-free gameplay will only lead to disappointment. However, with that said, if the developers build these servers as standalone products completely separate from the Call of Duty engine, it would be possible to reduce the baseline delay before ping is factored in. So, while you would have the same connection to these servers as regular hosts, you would experience less delay at a given ping. As for those delays, here is what Ghosts has to offer on release. There is a baseline delay of approximately 70 milliseconds, occurring across all game types for the host, whether that be LAN or system link, online at 0 milliseconds, or split screen for either player. For a comparison, Black Ops 2's split screen delay was approximately double, so we can see a clear improvement in response time. The delay for players is higher, both online and in a LAN setting, yet still an improvement over Black Ops 2. This pattern continues throughout, where Ghost's delays approach half that of Black Ops 2's as pings increase. Such a change can be explained purely by the switching of networking types as discussed earlier, for Black Ops 2's method employed synchronization of important events such as player deaths, whereas Ghosts does not. Such synchronization necessitates that information be transmitted both to the host and back again before any action occurs, whereas without it, the host only has to receive the information for the action to occur. That is to say, for players, Ghosts will always be faster than Black Ops 2 by an amount of time equal to approximately half ping. Those of you who have watched my previous commentaries know that in Black Ops 2, side advantage was exactly equal to its delays. In Ghosts, however, sight advantage varies considerably, on average plus or minus 50 milliseconds. This is primarily due to certain animations, and at very short distances the camera sway added as part of sprinting. For example, a player repeatedly moving back and forth will slowly drift left in Ghosts. You may currently find that sometimes players will see you sooner than they should, or conversely see you later than they should, and you can expect slightly variable experiences as a result. Make no mistake, however, plus or minus 50 milliseconds is nowhere near the degree of Black Ops 2's inconsistency in gameplay, and some of you will never notice it. With the misconception still floating around, I must reiterate sight advantage itself is not a camera glitch. Your player is simply in a slightly different location in everyone else's game than it is in yours. Lag and how the netcode handles that lag is fully responsible. Certainly these delays could be improved upon. They are still a few frames out from what is considered the best game in the series from a networking perspective. But they are now heading in the right direction, a direction along which they must continue. We do not need a repeat of the last two games. I must admit, considering those prior games, I fully expected this release to be terrible. In fact, that expectation was so high that I wrote a scathing commentary before Ghosts was even released, waiting only for a final confirmation before uploading. Thank you, Infinity Ward and supporting studios, for allowing me to delete that video and its associated preconceptions. After 4 years of playing Modern Warfare 2, facing nothing but disappointment from the later releases, this game has rekindled my love for the series. When the connection quality is excellent, Ghosts provides the smoothest, most responsive, and quite simply the best feeling FPS gameplay I have experienced in years. However, all is not perfect, and those matches with low pings are rare for many players at this time. Laggy games are responsible for the issues players are experiencing in Ghosts, including perceived issues with hit detection, and suspicion caused by the previous titles, as well as the lack of an in-game ping display, have resulted in the blame being incorrectly placed on LagComp. The devs must still prove themselves capable of improving matchmaking, or players will continue to experience many of the same problems as they did in both Modern Warfare 3 and Black Ops 2, only for different reasons. One such reason appears to be that the devs have once again chosen to match by location. Explained in my previous commentary, this is not appropriate, as it causes players to join games with high pings. In Ghosts, rather than matching strictly by ISP reported location, they may have chosen to match by lowest hops, an improvement as reported location is often incorrect, but still based on faulty logic. To illustrate this point, here is one Xbox forcing host in regular matchmaking. It is only a few hops away from the second Xbox with a ping of less than 20 milliseconds. The second Xbox joins it quickly. However, with the connection of the first Xbox delayed by a total of 300 milliseconds, the second Xbox still joins it. To rule out other variables, here is the same situation using a different connection with many more hops. The second Xbox does not join the first, even when the ping is less than 50 milliseconds, or over 250 milliseconds faster. The match joined instead had a ping of over 100 milliseconds, more than 50 milliseconds slower. The preference for location regardless of ping is clearly a bug. However, that is exactly what matching by location first does. It prevents the detection of better opportunities, thereby severely reducing connection quality. In a real-world setting, it is rare for players to purposely delay their connections, but poor home network implementations are very common, as are poor network conditions along a path outside of a user's control. For example, I have joined games hosted by players within my own city, yet with pings of over 250 milliseconds. I live near the west coast of North America, and I have a better connection to Europe than that. To further develop this explanation, assuming the bug is fixed and matchmaking continues to operate in a similar manner to the previous releases, Ghosts will first begin by finding a total of 50 games running on servers as close as possible to the player searching for those games. Among other operations, it will then query just those games for the best possible connection, which it will then join if possible. However, when many players are online and all 50 games occur within a small region, very typical of a new release, if one hop along a path is causing a severe delay, matchmaking will not be checking for any other games as it already has its 50. Therefore, it will completely ignore better matches farther away but which use a different path, thereby avoiding the laggy hop. Thus, we have the core problem of Call of Duty's matchmaking today. It does not take into account real-world network conditions. There are those who would say this is a problem with the network architecture of a service provider, for example, rather than a software issue. But the golden rule of programming is you cannot rely on others to do something the way you think they should. When it's someone using your program, you must assume said user will deliberately use it improperly and try to break it. When it's networking, you must assume there will be congestion or improper configuration. It is your responsibility as a software developer to be aware of these facts of life and to code your program in such a way that it is not dependent on something else working properly. No, it's not fair that programmers have to make up for the world's shortcomings, but that's part of the job, and that's also what makes it a job worth doing. And so the fix is simple. Our developers must understand that matching by location reduces the statistical probability of a game becoming laggy over time, but it is completely useless for detecting lag in the present moment. Thus, if the developers wish to use location-based matchmaking, they must use it after matching by ping. They must use it only to narrow the results, not to obtain them in the first place. That particular issue aside, most games from most developers suffer online issues at launch, and Infinity Ward deserves our short-term patience with ghosts as well. If necessary, I will follow my usual procedure and upload the next part of this commentary in a few months, after the developers have had ample time to fix important issues in both matchmaking and game design. Until such time, I encourage you to submit your questions and comments below, for they ultimately shape the content of my future videos. Now, instead of ending this commentary with the usual pointed remark concerning this series' direction, please enjoy something which is curiously missing from Ghosts.
Enemy Apache incoming.
Mais Dieu, j'avais pas vu que c'est gars.
Repeat, payload ready for deployment. Enemy UAV online. Missile ready for launch. Missiles ready for deployment.
Pop while you got it. That's not gonna pick it up. la misma,
Payload
motherfucker.
inbound. Predator missile ready for deployment. Enemy helicopter approaching.
They're doing something.
Payload ready for deployment.
Oh, no mames. No.
Predator missile ready for launch.
Friendly Predator missile inbound. Enemy care package incoming. Enemy UAV spotted. Enemy care package incoming.
You just killed them.
Predator missile inbound. There he is.
It was so worth it. I just freaking threw a throwing knife in his face. I didn't even know I had it.
Enemy hind incoming.
Je parle pas fort, mais ça va pas très fort.
Ah, fuck, il l'a tué.
Friendly Predator missile inbound. Harriers waiting for your mark.
Yeah, I'll hold down the house. You go find the boosters.
Harrier standing by.
Ooh, tough guy.
Enemy AC-130 above. Friendly Predator missile inbound.
incoming.
Front. There's like so in the middle. It's like
The developers made the right decision by finally removing the TacInsert. But I also miss it, for it provided an element of community interaction.